We begin with the latest on the trade war with the United States. Just one day after slapping a 25% surcharge on electricity Ontario sends to the U.S., Premier Doug Ford announcing he is pausing the levy after securing a visit to Washington later this week. Queen's Park reporter Lorena Redekop takes us through this roller coaster of a day.
Premier Doug Ford spoke to reporters this afternoon. He just had a phone call with President Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick.
And Secretary Lutnick has sent out an olive branch.
Ford will head to Washington this week to meet with Lutnick, along with Federal Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc, discussing not just tariffs, but the entire U.S.-Canada-Mexico trade deal. Given that, Ford says he's paused the 25% electricity surcharge.
With any negotiation that we have, there's a point that both parties are heated and the temperature needs to come down. And I thought this was the right decision. They understand how serious we are about the electricity and the tariffs.
Earlier in the day, on social media, Trump vowed planned steel and aluminum tariffs to Canada would double, not 25%, but 50%. Then, throughout the morning, Ford made a flurry of U.S. TV appearances, not backing down on increasing energy prices for U.S. customers.
What I recommend is on the electricity bill, put down this increase is a tariff from Trump. It's a Trump tariff, which is basically a Trump tax.
Trump clearly listening, posting on social media they will pay a financial price so big it will be read about in history books for years to come. Later came that call between Ford and Lutnick. As for the steel and aluminum tariffs,
he has to bounce it off the president, but I'm pretty confident he will pull back. And I'm not speaking for them. I'm not speaking for the president.
And Ford says if those tariffs do kick in, so will the federal government's dollar-for-dollar tariff response, according to a conversation he had with Minister LeBlanc. Trump also talked about Ford this afternoon.
As you know, there's a very strong man in Canada who said he was going to charge a surcharge or a tariff on electricity coming into our country. He has called and he said he's not going to do that. Okay, he's not going to do that. And it would have been a very bad thing if he did, and he's not going to do that, so I respect that.
Late in the day, the U.S. confirmed that those tariffs on steel and aluminum, they are going ahead, but at the lower 25%, not the threatened 50%. Tomorrow, Ford will be meeting with Prime Minister-designate Mark Carney ahead of that trip to Washington. Lorena Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Ford has dedicated a lot of time recently to appearances on U.S. media outlets criticizing Donald Trump. And experts say that strategy may have broken through as the premier now prepares to head to Washington to de-escalate the tariff situation. Queen's Park reporter Sean Jeffords takes a look.
It's called an olive branch.
Doug Ford on his plans to meet with the Trump administration about the escalating trade war between Canada and the U.S. That comes after Ford spent the week threatening to add a surcharge to electricity to the U.S. and ratcheting up his rhetoric against the U.S. president on American cable news stations. A move some experts say has gained traction. Ford just a few hours earlier.
This is absolute chaos created by one person, and that's Donald Trump. President Trump did an unprovoked attack on our country, and that's unacceptable.
And that's been consistent with Ford's messages to people at home.
He needs to pay the price in the midterms. If I got to go down there and knock on the doors myself, I will.
That increasingly sharp language against the president broke through today.
And it was a retaliatory statement due to the escalation of rhetoric that we've seen out of Ontario, Canada. The president saw the premier, Doug Ford, make an egregious and insulting comment threatening to shut down electricity for the American people.
Conservative strategist Shakir Chambers says Ford's media blitz has worked and has the added benefit of being popular at home.
And I would say not only Ontarians, but I have friends in Alberta, I have friends in BC. They see this and they're, regardless of their political stripe, they're applauding how aggressive Ford is in dealing with the White House right now.
Liberal strategist Charles Byrd says Ford can go further than federal ministers who are heading up talks with Trump. And his appearances on U.S. cable networks appear to have landed.
If this becomes uncomfortable politically for the Americans to be doing, and as we get closer to the midterms at the end of next year, which is admittedly a long time from now, That is significant.
But McMaster University professor Peter Grafe says he's been skeptical of Ford's escalating rhetoric on Trump.
Mr. Ford is maybe late in discovering some features of Mr. Trump's personality or how he engages situations, but the very material impacts of Mr. Trump's decisions mean that, Mr. Ford's been shaken out of thinking like a partisan and having to think much more like an Ontarian.
While Ford says he's accepted the olive branch from the Trump administration and called off the electricity surcharges for now, it's not clear if he'll call off his media blitz south of the border or his criticisms of Donald Trump. Sean Jeffords, CBC News, Toronto.
A woman is dead after being stabbed inside a Brampton apartment building. It happened this morning, police saying it was a child who made the 911 call. Dale Manukduk has this story.
It was around 8:30 Tuesday morning when police got a call about a disturbance. Police responded to this Brampton apartment building on Kennedy Road South, just north of Steeles Avenue East. When they arrived, they located a woman in her 40s who had been stabbed.
She was transported by paramedics to a trauma center in life-threatening condition. She was and has since been pronounced deceased in hospital. We do have a suspect that is in custody, a man in his 30s.
Police say that woman and man are known to each other, but did not say whether it's a case of intimate partner violence, which Peel Regional Police declared an epidemic back in 2023.
It is my understanding that there was a child that was in the residence at the time, and the child was the one who contacted police.
Police were on scene for most of the day, holding a unit on the 12th floor. Residents in the building were shocked to learn what happened.
I saw when lady was going in the ambulance. Yes, and she was like bruised up here, and I see the bruised here, and she was bleeding too. And then I said when some kid has to call police,
It's very odd. It's hard for a child. I don't know what age that person is, but for them to go through that, it's very trauma. For a child to go through that, to see their mother stabbed to death in an apartment.
Police haven't said what the relationship is between the woman and child. There's no word yet on charges. Police are asking that anyone with information come forward. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
The Ontario Fire Marshal is investigating after a large fire ripped through a house in Brampton.
What we believe, we don't have any occupants in the house, but we really can't confirm that until we get the fire out and do a full assessment. We do have collapse in the house, so it's going to be a difficult task to get in there and assess that situation.
Brampton Fire says it happened at around 3:30 this morning on Wainwright Drive, just off of McLaughlin Road. Crews say the fire began in the garage and quickly spread through the home, forcing firefighters to fight the flames from outside. They were able to contain the flames before they spread to other homes, and there are no reported injuries. It was exactly 5 years ago the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic. The declaration kickstarted a bevy of policies that transformed the way Canadians lived for years. It followed months of rapid spread of the virus, which forced mass lockdowns in China and Italy. The declaration triggering the shutdown of schools and offices. Travel limits and bans on social gatherings were put in place, and public health officials became household names as Canadians sought to keep up with the latest advice during each new wave. The global COVID-19 health emergency was lifted in May 2023, following a downward trend of infections for more than a year. Now, the anniversary may evoke some strong emotions from people as they reflect on a time when the world changed. Our Ali Chiasson checked out an exhibit at York University designed to do just that.
You are walking back in time, 5 years to be exact, back to masks and gloves, when arrows on the floor told you where to walk and X's where to stand, a strict 6 feet apart.
For a lot of people, the experience was really difficult, and so we've taken it and put it somewhere in our brains and forgotten about it.
On these screens are scenes from the pandemic that many of us have forgotten, suppressed even. What it felt like to see empty grocery store shelves, to hoping that second line doesn't appear on your spit test.
It's really speaking to that day-to-day impact that they had as they were trying to navigate this new space and this unknown.
York University's Disaster and Emergency Management program has put together this immersive experience to remind people of the journey of uncertainty and growth.
So I thought it would be important for us to all come together and just realize that, you weren't alone in that experience, and look at where you are.
A lot of people mentioning that, they didn't really remember what it was like. Some of those years kind of felt like a blur, but seeing it all up on the screen, they remember those hard times of having to be distanced from your own family if you didn't live in the same house.
I remember when they announced the very first case landed in Canada, right? The couple vacationing and then they came back. I remember I came home from school that day and I immediately went to the Home Depot on my way home on Queen Street and got a whole bunch of N95s. Yeah, well, they're still a good price.
So I like this section here. People were invited to write a message on this whiteboard. If COVID-19 was a person, what would you tell them? One person wrote, "So long, hope to never see you again." And another wrote, "You don't scare me," the big exclamation point.
And coming together, I think, is part of this immersive, reflective experience. We're coming together to walk back in time and see how far we've come.
The exhibit was designed to evoke all kinds of feelings, including gratitude for those who were fortunate enough to make it 5 years on since COVID changed the world. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
The province's plan to remove bike lanes in Toronto was in front of the courts today. Cyclists are seeking an injunction to prevent any work from happening as they wait for their legal challenge to have its day in court next month. Lane Harrison has the latest.
A group of cyclists took the province to court today to make sure this keeps happening, arguing against plans to remove the Bloor, Yonge and University bike lanes, a plan the province says is needed to improve car traffic, something its opponents say it knows won't happen, according to internal ministry documents made public in court today.
Their documents were entirely consistent, in our view, with the case that we were putting forward, which was that removal of protected bike lanes, these protected bike lanes, is going to result in a very significant increase in collisions and injuries as a result. And as much as the province says otherwise, that's not what their documents say. It's not what their expert says.
Cycle Toronto, including the nonprofit's executive director, who was injured in an unprotected bike lane, is leading the challenge against the plan, saying it violates people's right to life by making roads more dangerous for cyclists, and saying it's an arbitrary decision that won't improve congestion. That legal challenge will be heard in full on April 16th, but the province has said work to remove the bike lanes could start later this month. So today, the cyclists were in court arguing for an injunction to ensure that no work happens until their challenge gets its day in court. And it was a popular hearing with so many people in attendance today that they had to open an overflow room for people to watch the proceedings.
I think what we're seeing in there's a lot of public interest in this. And even, in terms of this idea of a silent majority, we did have a provincial election recently, and the MPP out in Etobicoke Lakeshore, who based a lot of her campaign on removing the bike lanes on Bloor, she lost.
The lawyer for the province argued an injunction shouldn't be granted because the entire challenge will eventually be dismissed, saying the charter doesn't provide a right to services from the government and that in the scope of the charter, issues raised by cyclists, like their daily commutes becoming longer, are trivial, while disputing evidence that removing bike lanes makes people less safe. He says the government will present evidence arguing its side, but that will come during the hearing on the merits of the application. Now it's up to a judge alone to make a decision on the injunction application that was heard today, though when that decision will come isn't exactly clear. Lane Harrison, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. The Raptors have just 17 games remaining in their dismal regular season, and with playoffs out of reach, could the focus be shifting to getting a higher draft pick? Greg Ross has more.
Ed digs in, takes it. Scotty! The finger roll at the iron.
There's no reason to believe that Raptors players aren't giving it their all on the court in recent weeks. But there is reason to believe that the front office and the coaching staff are content to lose as many games as possible in the final weeks of the season. The team's strategy in close games lately is all the evidence you need.
We've seen them at times, they've pulled their starters or their key players late in games, and we've seen Scotty Barnes not on the court in close games, late in games. We've seen RJ Barrett pulled late in games.
The more they lose, the better chance they have at getting a higher draft pick this year. The Raptors have gone so far as to rest players for entire games. Starting center Jakob Poeltl has sat out 2 of the last 3 games. He says it's not what he wants, but he supports the team's decision.
At the end of the day, they're like my head coach and the front office, those guys are my bosses at the end of the day. So if they want me to play, I'll play. If they don't want me to play, I won't play, and I'm sure they know what they're doing.
Regardless of who they have on the court, head coach Darko Rajakovic says the focus is still the same.
We take every game seriously. I think it's very important for our culture to have that and for guys to play the right way throughout every single game.
On Saturday, the Raptors almost managed to win a close game with most of their starters on the bench.
Shed makes a move. Shed!
Rookie Jamal Shed hit this shot at the buzzer, which would have won the game for the Raptors, although it didn't count after the replay showed he didn't get the ball off on time. Still, he says he is relishing the opportunity to play at key times.
Just learning little things about all the guys that I'm looking forward to playing with next year, and then also trying to elevate the guys around me.
Many fans seem to be on board with tanking.
I feel like winning's very important, but at the same time, you got to do what you got to do to have a long-term plan to win more.
Well, if they are building for the future, I think there's something there.
If the Raptors are trying to lose, there is one thing that could throw a wrench into their plans.
The Raptors have by far the easiest remaining schedule in the league, and that's going to make it tough to lose a ton of games the rest of the way because those other teams, as we've seen recently, are equally determined to tank.
The Raptors have actually won 4 of their last 5 games. They currently have the 5th worst record in the league. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Mayor Olivia Chow was in Scarborough today touring a local company as part of the city's Buy Local campaign.
This uncertainty and chaos needs to stop. As long as the threat hangs over Canada, we will respond forcefully. And the City of Toronto is taking a Team Canada approach. I fully support what the federal and the provincial government are doing to protect Canadians.
The city recently passed a motion to develop a comprehensive campaign to support local businesses affected by the tariffs. Chow also announcing today that Toronto's Economic Action Plan will be presented to the public next Monday. Well, fans in the mood for a melody will have to wait another year to hear the legendary Billy Joel sing us a song in Toronto. Joel was set to play Rogers Centre this Saturday, but shared on Instagram that he's recovering from a recent surgery and will have to postpone 4 months of shows. Toronto show will now happen on March 14th, 2026. The singer saying all tickets purchased for Saturday's show will be valid next year. Now, Joel didn't provide much detail, but said he is doing physical therapy and expects to make a full recovery. A new scientific trial is testing a simple strategy for fighting extreme heat. It's painting the roof white, then reflecting light and heat back to the sky. The study spans several countries. Now, this is India's Ahmedabad, where the heat reaches 46 degrees. Indoor temperatures will be monitored and residents' health will be tracked. Heat waves that happen once every 10 years before the Industrial Revolution are now 3 times as likely. All right, Colette is here with the check on the forecast. And Colette, yeah, another beautiful day. I know temperatures are going to take a little bit of a dip, though, right? Just for a little bit.
That's exactly it. So we get a bit of a hit, but there's more to come when it comes to the milder weather. Yes, right? So I hope you enjoyed today, and you'll have a chance again a little bit later this week when milder air pushes back in. But tomorrow's kind of that transition day where things are going to be cooler. Just having a look at some other transitions we've had to make recently with the changes to Lakeshore clock. So your sunrise tomorrow is 7:34 and the sunset will be at 7:20. So in terms of our daylight hours, we're just about 14 minutes shy of having 12 solid hours. So those days getting longer and longer. And then just looking at the highs from today, 12 degrees, of course that stands out for Toronto, but how about 15 for Windsor and 14 for St. Catharines? Barrie even 8 degrees before that temperature began to slide behind that cold front, and the winds were kicking up as well. So becoming partly cloudy through the overnight tonight, but really as we head through the day on Wednesday, quite a bit of cloud cover will be in play. And along with that, especially near the lakeshore, we're going to have those winds coming in off the lake, an east to northeasterly flow. So it's going to have a cooler feel for many reasons because of that. But then look ahead towards Thursday. Let's take you there. High pressure begins to nose in again. And as it does, we'll have a few clouds, perhaps somewhat variable at times, but a good amount of sunshine over southern and eastern parts of the province coming our way too. Now, in terms of those winds, they back off around the Golden Horseshoe at least, not so much for southwestern Ontario, but for the Golden Horseshoe overnight tonight into early tomorrow. So that modifies somewhat the wind chills that we'll be feeling. But then they pick back up in the afternoon. And that's why I'm saying, especially near the lake, there's going to be a chilly feel because of the wind strength, but also the direction of them coming on in. Overnight temperatures tonight, a big change from this afternoon. -10 the low, -4 for Toronto, and -2 for those of you into southwestern Ontario. That -4 tomorrow morning is going to feel like -8, and then into the afternoon we're only going to climb to a high of 1 degree. At least we get above freezing there, and then just looking ahead at Thursday, then that warm up begins again in earnest. So Thursday 7 and Friday a mix of sun and cloud up to 10 degrees, much milder this weekend, but for those like the last weekend of March break, it is likely also to be wet, especially Sunday.
But look at those temperatures. I mean, double digits all the way through.
Yes, some teens coming back at us. There you go.
Thanks so much, Colette. And that's all the time we have tonight. Thanks for watching. Have a great night, everyone.